All right, so a few days ago, I asked on Twitter what people think it's a CoinJoin, and I got some interesting answers. And here we have Adam Waxwing Gibson, the CoinJoin expert, to see his reactions to what people say on this. So what's happening, Adam?
I'm fine, but I'm not sure about the expert, but okay.
Okay, you're not the expert. So you like Twitter a lot, right?
It is literally a scourge on humanity. It's possibly the worst thing in the world right now.
So do you guys think this is
Apart from that, it's great.
Like I pretty much scammed you into using Twitter again, pretty much.
And using a MacBook at the same time. Yeah. So no, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of, I didn't expect this kind of blah, blah, blah. This picture of Elon Musk. Yeah. I've got my hazard suit on. I'm ready to plunge into the depths of humanity. So I'm not quite sure everyone's giving these weird kind of like jokey analogies and not just answering the question. I guess that's just, I'm not on Twitter. I don't know how people... Okay, so the first tweet is from some weirdo called Raw Avocado. And it says, what is a CoinJoin? Let's see what people think is the right answer, or a answer to that question. Put your gold coins in the pot along with a bunch of other people's coins. Melt them all down. This is exactly the analogy that I used in my talk in Lisbon in 2018. That was called, because we had like breaking Bitcoin and they had building Bitcoin in 2018. It was kind of a great conference, a lot of fun. And I was trying to explain CoinJoin XT, but I thought I have to make the start of the talk be about what on earth CoinJoin is in the first place. And so I have to talk about what I like to call the intrinsic fungibility of Bitcoin, which is this really like a weird phrase to use for something which everyone tends to think of as non-fungible or not very fungible in our spectrum again. And I used exactly that analogy with a picture of gold being smelted down. So, the gold has certain shapes in it, in the form of a cup or a statue, whatever. And then it gets, who makes gold statues? I don't know. But anyway, it all gets melted down and then new objects get created, and it's the same stuff, so in this case Satoshis, but it's kind of fun to think about the fact that Bitcoins don't exist and Satoshis, individual Satoshis don't exist, and that's why they're not watermarked when you have a many-to-many transaction, because you can't say that the Satoshis in input 1 all went into the output in position 2. You can't, it's not that you're not clever enough to figure out that connection, it's that that connection doesn't exist.
So Satoshis don't exist, that's the bottom line here.
Yeah, Satoshis don't exist, I think is a really important, I'm sure I'm not the only person who said that, so that you can think about it if you haven't heard it before. So Eric can't meme, put your gold coins in the pot along with it. I like your thing. So next one is, when you take traceable UTXOs and batch them in large pools with other willing parties to consolidate and output identical looking UTXOs to create large anonymity sets to increase plausible deniability of UTXO ownership. I mean, perhaps at some point we should address this question of whether, when people are describing CoinJoin, they're only describing a certain way of doing CoinJoin in which we create equal sized outputs. Because you could also have a transaction, and I want to give the example of PayJoin as the simple example, where I pay you, Alex, one coin, but no, I shouldn't say one coin because then you get confused if I mean UTXO. If I pay you 0.1 Bitcoin, it's possible for you to contribute and input yourself to the transaction, so that there's one input from me and one input from you, and the output that you get is 0.1 higher than the input you provided. So you do get paid 1 Bitcoin, but it's in the context of a CoinJoin. And in that context, I'm using the word CoinJoin as the most general definition possible, as any transaction in which more than one participant contributes inputs. And I think I'm not alone in this, I think. I would consider that a CoinJoin. And part of it is because I think there's a lot of different models. You don't necessarily have to have equal sized outputs, but that's, at least up until today, almost every, not quite, but almost every CoinJoin implementation that people have used has been like that. So that's a whole discussion. You think he covered that pretty well? Yeah, from one angle, yeah. The love child of two non-parents. Okay, maybe. You like that, don't you? Everyone participates, this is Dennis Levins. I should have said the names each time. Everyone participating puts the same denomination in a bag. Oh, no. No, but that's the point, is that you don't have to use the same denomination as input. But there are implementations, specifically Samurai's Whirlpool, right, which is specifically designed around that concept. So maybe we should come on to that. Everyone participating puts the same denomination. The bag is shaken. Everyone pulls a bill out. No one knows which bill they pulled. Rinse and See, he's made the fundamental cognitive error there. He thinks that there is a real bill on the outputs that corresponds to a real bill. Because what he's thinking is, let's say there's 5 inputs and 5 outputs. He's saying that when it's built, like the top one actually does correspond to the first one on the input. And then you have to like randomize both sides, and therefore when you take one out, you don't know which one but no, actually intrinsic, that's what I mean by intrinsic fungibility. A Bitcoin transaction cannot specify a relationship between inputs and outputs, as long as there are multiple of them on both sides, because no such relationship exists.
Right.
I think most people like you get it, but it's something that just, it will never occur to people unless they've actually thought about Bitcoin in that mechanical way.
I like his explanation. I don't know if I got it from that one, but anyway, yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's just that sentence, no one knows which bill they pulled. It doesn't, I mean, okay, as an analogy, it's fine. It's just that in concretely, that's not what's true. Rinse and repeat a bunch of times. So he's talking about the model which, it's very easy to like this model. I certainly don't dislike it, which is the Samurai model of, let's make what they call like perfect entropy individual CoinJoin transactions where all the inputs are the same size, all the outputs are the same size, and then you can like combine them in a patchwork, right? So that's great. The only problem with it is that it doesn't address the denomination problem of what amounts people actually want. You know, if I've got 100 Bitcoin, if I want to spend 1.3645 Bitcoin, then it doesn't mean you can't use the system, but it's just going to add another layer to the operations that you're performing. So it's a complicated story, but it's not terrible. Vlad Kostia, I have syphilis and never used protection. So instead of passing it on to a single partner who will know where she got it from, I go to some Czech orgy. Where is it Czech? What's he got against the Czechs? Isn't he? He's Romanian as well, isn't it? Like you.
Yeah.
What's he got against the Czechs? All right, nobody will know where it comes from, but they'll have to live with it. New norm gets established, everyone becomes immune. See, I know he's making a funny joke, but I think he's getting at something, which is this whole angle that a lot of people have, which is that with public CoinJoin, so specifically it means CoinJoin protocols where when you look on chain, you can see that it is a CoinJoin, and it's explicitly a transaction designed to create privacy for its participants.
Non-steganographical?
Non-steganographic. Very good, non-steganographic. So the thing about that is, some people have made a cogent argument that says, well, that's a bad thing because I don't want people to know that I'm doing. So there's one thing to hide, but there's another thing to hide the fact that you're hiding. So if you only hide but don't hide the fact that you're hiding, then there are circumstances in which you could consider that as a dangerous thing to do. The obvious example would be you're in a very authoritarian regime that's trying to control everything you do. If they see that you use encryption, PGP, whatever, or if they see that you use CoinJoin, even Bitcoin at all, but especially if they see you use CoinJoin, they'll be like, no, that's no, and they'll throw you in prison. I think it's a debatable point, and the reason I think it's debatable is because you can make the argument that in choosing to use Bitcoin at all as money, you're implicitly, even if perhaps only slightly, making a kind of political statement where you're saying, I don't think the government should have the total right to all kinds of control over money, including printing it, including controlling where it goes, because those are the things that Bitcoin challenges. So there's this intrinsic somewhat of a political statement in using it at all. So you can make the argument that it's doing public CoinJoins is a kind of political statement that, and I feel this a little bit. I'm not really sure how strongly I feel that, but when I have over the last several years used CoinJoin, specifically in sending money to a merchant, let's say, I've felt that by doing that, I may be improving the privacy of my coin, but I'm also sort of coming up against that hard edge of what Bitcoin is really about, which you can easily kind of avoid if you just either leave it on Coinbase or you stick it on the hardware wallet and forget about it for 10 years. Very interesting debates to be had around all that stuff. So WasabiWallet answers, well, I said that's the official That's the official answer, yeah. CoinJoin is a collaborative Bitcoin transaction with so they're using that more general definition, exactly what I just blethred on about. They're saying that is the most general definition, and I believe they're correct. But Greg Maxwell's original post on the topic, where he coined the term, CoinJoin, actually, I believe, did use all equal outputs, but whatever. Yeah, so next we come on to Odell, who's about as non-committal as possible here. A collaborative Bitcoin transaction, which is the same as what Wasabi said, but without specifying multiple. But it's the same thing. Yeah, he's being very, very general, but I can agree with that definition as a completely general. I don't.
Sure, but a collaborative transaction.
Yeah, if it was
could also be a
collaborative,
channel closed or open or something.
Multi-sig as well. Yeah.
Multi-sig also. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's too general. So that is too general. Matt, you're too general there. I think
Wasabi restriction at least.
WasabiWallet is more on the money in my personal view of it. So Shadow of Intent says, you mix your UTXO with other people's with the same value, or people's, right? Apostrophe. To become the default if when cross-input signature, that's a very interesting point. He's showing his knowledge there. To become the default if/when cross-input signature aggregation makes it to production. So the interesting point with that is he's saying, when we get to the point where we can make transactions where, say you've got 10 inputs on the transaction, you can, instead of having 10 signatures, you can just combine it and have a single signature, which will mean that the overall data cost of the transaction is drastically reduced. Theoretically, it's a bit complicated, but it's reduced anyway. And therefore, people will want to do coin joins because instead of doing their crappy little one input transaction, they can just find 10 other people and say, let's all do our transactions together using the property of, or the concept of coin join, which is that you can fix the output so you don't have to worry about them stealing your money. So you just combine it all down, you get much smaller signature data. Again, it's not really much smaller, but it is smaller, and you save money. And so if we can save money while doing CoinJoin, then CoinJoin is more attractive. But then we have the counter argument, which says that, but if you do it that way, then you won't all have equal sized outputs, and so it won't really be creating a big anonymity set because there's such a thing as subset sum analysis, which allows somebody to look at the transaction and explicitly figure out who was the inputs to which and who was the outputs for that. And then you've got the counter argument, which says, but what about the knapsack problem, which is like really hard? And then it just depends, and it all gets very complicated. Next, it's a Bitcoin Bukake.
Where's that one? Oh yeah, I see it now.
Fuck no. What the fuck?
I told you it's funny. I know it's gonna be funny.
So this is the followers you have, my friend. Anyway,
yes.
No, but not. These people are great. I mean, that's a take. That's a take. Okay, so we've got another one attempting to define here: UTXO ownership obfuscation technique. True, and I agree with the word obfuscation specifically because it doesn't destroy the linkage with past UTXOs. It only makes like an anonymity set. It makes it unclear. Yeah, it confuses it. He means where several inputs are shuffled. Not really. Generating mixed outputs. I'm not quite sure what mixed means in that context. In an on-chain transaction, true. Breaking the ownership link and thus enhancing privacy. Yeah, you say that's very concise. I don't really agree because there's no. The thing about shuffling is interesting actually. When we decide to make a coin join together, let's say you and me, or maybe it's better with 10 people, we can just contribute our inputs in order, and then we can build our outputs in order. But of course, the problem with that is then if everyone knows we're doing that, then everyone knows that the first output corresponds to the first input. Oops. Right. Yeah, so generally speaking, we have at least some element of shuffling where we randomize inputs and outputs. You know, there's an argument about BIP69 and blah, blah, blah. We don't have to worry about that. Basically, we shuffle stuff. So he's right in saying that, so maybe I was wrong in criticizing that point because we pretty much always have to do that. Several inputs are shuffled, but it's not just that several inputs, it's inputs from different parties, different people.
I'm not sure if he was actually going towards the nuance you are talking about here. I'm not sure.
Possibly not. It's difficult to say for sure.
I think he was just in shuffling general, but anyway.
Okay, Bitcoin, Precious Matters is saying, Bitcoin bought off exchanges are tied to buyer because of KYC. Yep. Bitcoin holders to obfuscate KYC link with the Bitcoin can use CoinJoin implemented by wallets, whereby equal quantity of Bitcoin, more places holders mix the I mean, somewhat. I mean, interesting point there is that angle of we need CoinJoin to deal with KYC as a problem. It's not wrong, it's absolutely correct. My only concern is that people don't think that CoinJoin has any other value. Like if I bought my Bitcoin off something without KYC, so nobody has my identity tied to it, it could still be very valuable. It could be. I mean, I'm not saying you have to do it all the time, certainly not. But it could still be very valuable to use CoinJoin in as much as if for whatever reason the person you pay money to, you buy a car or something, I don't know, you buy some expensive item, or you buy even better, you buy some cheap item like a coffee. You don't really want them to look at the inputs of the transaction and be able to look backwards and say, oh yeah, I can see this guy is definitely the guy who owns this 500 Bitcoin over there, and then come and rob you. So I think it's really important that people don't forget that our concern with privacy in Bitcoin is not purely about the oppressive regulatory system, which it certainly is, but it's also just about personal security. I think that's really important. Batch transaction? Well, no. I mean, let's be clear. It's not, right? Why is it not? Tell me. I'm going to make you answer.
I probably wouldn't agree with that. I think I said
no. You pressed like on it, but
because there's multiple outputs and multiple inputs from different parties. That's
yeah.
It.
I mean, maybe it's just a question of semantics, like what you define as something. But to me, a batch transaction is when I make several payments in one Bitcoin transaction. Yeah. That's how it's been traditionally used. Like when exchanges need to pay out to their customers, it's very good if they use batch transactions because they can save space by. You get the idea, yeah. But that's not the same as CoinJoin where you have multiple participants in input.
So wrong, next.
Can I just point out that your Mac will sleep soon unless plugged in? Oh, this is interesting, just because you said something I often tell people as well. So in this one here, mixed in the transaction graph later on, but all sats can be traced backwards to the originating blocks. And you said...
But that's because you told me actually, because remember that time when I had that conversation, you go like, that's not true, that's wrong. Yeah, well, stick for the camera.
Yeah, well, okay, so let's talk about that, because I think it's very interesting.
You just explain, forget about it.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point. People will often say all coins can be traced back to their origin, which has to be like minted in a block, right? A coinbase reward, right? Otherwise, where would it come from? Because otherwise, we're not allowed to print coins out of nothing apart from that. And of course, that's in some empty sense definitely true, right? That's where all coins come from. But if I show you one of my UTXOs, my live wallet today, you're gonna try and trace it back. Are you gonna be able to trace it back to one Coinbase?
Well, I know now for a fact, no. It's pretty obvious when you think about it.
It's obvious when you think about it, isn't it? Because when you look at each transaction, it has multiple. It's not true that every transaction has multiple inputs. So if a transaction has one input, there's only one place it came from.
Correct.
But if it has even just two inputs, you've already branched the tree, and now there's two histories you've got to look at. And if they're all one input, one output, then it's easy. It's just a straight line. But of course, they never are. Almost like very few transactions have only one input. Most of them have.
Especially today.
Yeah, especially today. Most of them have, well, it varies between like 1 and 4 typically, and then there's some special ones like CoinJoins with tons and tons of inputs. But anyway, even if it's like 3 or 2, if it's like 2 on average, then you have a branching factor of 2. So by the time you got to the Coinbase, you've got this massive fan of like thousands upon thousands of transactions. And that's not even paying any attention to the problem that if you do have things like CoinJoins, then you trace back to a particular UTXO and then you look at the inputs. You don't know which of those inputs actually were owned by the same person as that output. So it's almost absurdly wrong to say all sats can be traced backwards to the originating blocks. I mean, it's an almost ridiculous thing to say, and it just astonishes me that people actually think like that. I mean, if they ever turn their brain on at all about how Bitcoin works, I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah. You just have two problems, right? You can't be sure about an anonymity set. You cannot be they're not steganographical, and you kind of figure it to solve both. The first one with fidelity bonds.
No, but they're interesting. The two things are very closely connected because when you use a steganographic protocol, that means concretely in terms of Bitcoin, it means making transactions which have some special privacy flavor to them, but they look like ordinary transactions, and that means that the concept that we have in our head of anonymity set, where we look at how many equal outputs there are, is no longer relevant anymore. Because if I make, let's say I make 5 transactions in a graph, and you imagine all the Bitcoin transactions in the whole graph of the blockchain, they're all connected with, every time there's an output gets spent, it goes there and it goes there. But there's this like little subgraph of 5 or 10 transactions, and they're actually a CoinJoin in the specific sense that there are multiple people involved in creating the inputs, which are multi-sig in this case. And because they're taproot, you don't know that they're multi-sig, and the outputs are all like different amounts, and you don't know who's paying who, or you know what I mean? Talking about anonymity set there becomes very problematic because you've deliberately created them so they look, that little subgraph of the whole graph has nothing special about it. It looks totally normal compared to all the others. So what's its anonymity set? Is it every person ever used Bitcoin, or is it?
It still doesn't click any how are these two linked though, because this is what you're trying to exemplify.
Well, I mean, anonymity set would be how many other people could you confuse me with in doing this action, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I just feeling like I just feel like anonymity set is always linked to some form of sibling attack, right? That's what I'm trying to say. But like
Is it? I mean, in CoinJoin, is it connected to a Sybil attack? I mean, okay. So what you're saying is that a Sybil attack on a CoinJoin is when your so-called peers are actually not distinct. They're actually the same person. But that's a distinct concept. In order to analyze the Sybil attack, you have to think about the anonymity set.
You have to be able to differentiate between other things.
Yeah. So the idea here is that if we are part of a set of 5 people engaging in this CoinJoin protocol, we have to worry whether the other people are Sybils or not. That's the Sybil attack part of it. That's part of the off-chain negotiation that goes on. But when I talk about anonymity set, I'm talking about the blockchain analyst looking at the public data,
Right.
and he's saying, I look at this Wasabi CoinJoin, and let's say it's got 50 equal sized outputs, therefore it's got an anonymity set of 50, that UTXO has an anonymity set of 50.
Right.
But if that same blockchain analyst were to look at a CoinJoin protocol, the on-chain footprint of it, where it was steganographic, and where it was just a set of transactions, each one of which looked completely like an ordinary payment transaction.
Right, yeah.
He can't even start analyzing an anonymity set because he can't find it in the first place. Yeah. I mean, to me, that's the sort of holy grail. To whatever extent that CoinJoin is important in future. I mean, his point about cross-input signature aggregation is very good, except that it's kind of doesn't gel very well with privacy properties. But I think it's more important the idea that we create some form of using the power, and because that blog post really went into this, the power of Taproot, the power of multisig in Taproot, the power of SegWit, and even the power of Lightning and Schnorr signatures and point-in-time lock contracts. Believe it or not, even that could be relevant. All those things together could mean that you create various transaction structures which completely hid themselves in the blockchain in the sense that they look like other payment transactions, even though there might be 10 people involved. And it could have a market if you could use off-chain payments to incentivize it without putting those off-chain payments on the chains and blah, blah, blah. I'm just regurgitating the blog.
What's the name of the blog? You have to show the blog.
So it's reyify.com. That's spelled reyify.com/blog, and it's CoinJoin done right.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You can just link it in.
Yeah. I gotta see it. Okay, well, this was it. Thanks. For
Okay.
doing this.
Not at all. I enjoyed it.
Cool.
Thank you.